Now, every single day, Dove, you know, we get a feeling that besides big talk, the West is beginning to prepare for a changed world order. And every week, more and more people are actually, their stand is becoming either ambiguous or they are moving towards a greater sympathy for Russia. It's quite clear here, NATO is hapless and helpless out here. You know, the US President, UK Prime Minister, whole NATO brigade this week, Dove, they landed in Belgium for this extraordinary session. And this meeting actually served as the perfect blow to this illusion. They could do nothing. They could do nothing, Dove. So well, are we moving towards a new world order right now? America's role will come under question, sorry.
Well, couple of things. First, I totally disagree with you on NATO and the United States. We're destroying the Russian economy. By the way, I am really shocked. It's the only way I can put it, that India, which claims to be neutral and sympathetic, at least to the humanitarian crisis, is negotiating a deal with Russia for 12 Su-30 aircraft right now as we speak. I am absolutely shocked. Not only that, the Financial Times, which is not an American newspaper, has said that this is going to be a rupee for ruble deal. Now, come on. You're accusing NATO of being weak? What is India doing? That's number one. Number two, the sanctions have been hurting, and you say Russia's advancing? Russia isn't advancing at all. Not only that, the Ukrainians blew up a Russian ship. They're knocking out Russian tanks. They're knocking out Russian aircraft. I was speaking to a Russian yesterday who said, oh, we control the skies. What nonsense. They're shooting them down. They weren't even supposed to have an air force by now. So please, Arnab, we can disagree, but let's stick to the facts.
Okay, I'll let Daria and others respond to you. I shall only respond to you very briefly to your unnecessary attack on India. I do not understand anymore, and it's becoming frustrating that any discussion regarding this war becomes a discussion on India. Well, I will say it one more time to you, Dove. India is going to take care of India. India is going to look after India's interests. And our economy is growing 3 times the pace or 4 times the pace of the American economy. More and more Americans are living under the poverty line. They are not able to make ends meet, right? And more Indians are rising economically. And please, this is not our war. Dove, you are the ones with the biolabs in Ukraine. You are the ones, you know, Joe Biden's son was doing all kinds of business in Ukraine. You are vested in Ukraine. You are pushing Ukraine. You are encouraging Ukraine. And yesterday, your president went and said, listen, Zelensky, if you want to give up territory, it's your choice. Listen, Zelensky, if you want to break up your country and give a little bit of it to Russia, it's your choice. You have hung the Ukrainians out to dry, Dove, and how dare you question India all the time? You've hung them out to dry.
Well, we've hardly hung them out to dry, considering we're providing them more arms.
You're just saying go fight to the last Ukrainian.
Over $2.5 billion of assistance. How much have you guys given? The whole world considers Mr.
We've given humanitarian aid. It's your war.
Aggressor.
It's your war. We'd rather give them food than weapons. By giving them weapons, you are driving them further down into greater difficulty.
Oh, really? You would rather have the Russians massacre every Ukrainian?
I want Daria to come into this.
All right. I've made my point. You've made yours.
Yes. Thank you. This is very interesting discussion that we have tonight. It shows the two different approach for the destiny of countries, as we see it on the example of India, for example, when my American colleague was saying that India has no right to do something. This is the total, exactly the American way of thinking about the world. That some countries, that America thinks that this country can dictate its own rules to the other countries, to India, to Ukraine, to other countries, whenever they are, to Europe. But the thing is that this world order is in the past. Now there is a multipolar world where there are a lot of states. There is Indian bloc civilization, there's Russian civilization, there is European civilizations, there is American civilization, which is also very interesting and very specific. And actually, there is no unipolar idea, unipolar world. The world had changed. And what America and United States and the United States government is doing now is trying to do the last battle for this unipolarity. And Mr. Arnott, I thank you for also quoting and mentioning the topic about the biolaboratories. US is not doing this biological epidemiological researches inside America, but it's putting everywhere in the world the points where there are the biolabs which are working on the BL4 level of the importance. So that means that these biolabs are working with quite epidemiological high threats. And the thing is that US is trying to stay in this world order of unipolarity and to dictate to the other states what to do, as they were trying to dictate to Russia. So Russia didn't agree with that, and we made our historical choice. United States tried to dictate how to behave to Ukraine, and it led to the disaster. It caused this catastrophe, and it starts to dictate to Europe how to behave. But this is not possible. The world is multipolar. Every country, every civilizational bloc has its own right for its own policy, and Russians and Americans doesn't have a right to dictate. We need to let the world be multipolar. This is my statement. This is my thoughts.
I think, yeah, absolutely. I want to come to John. John, you know, maybe this is a post-colonial world that, and it's been too many years since the World War II, which the West is not beginning to get accustomed to, and especially given the economic advances of nations, the economic and military advances of nations over the last couple of decades, particularly. I think that what's happening here is that the aspiration of several large and significant countries to be powers in their own right and not part of any bloc is something which the West is not being able to tolerate. But India, China, Russia, these are large countries. Yes. They have a long history. And I think the West must reconcile to the way several countries have grown in the last few decades.
And there is a sense that the global South understands that the West, it no longer has the answers to the challenges of the 21st century. And this is accelerating the schism that was already underway between East and West. And I think when this is all over, it's a tragedy for the country, a tragedy for all those people losing their lives. But when this is all over, the world will be in a much better place. That is providing that there is de-escalation and reasoning starts to take place of the war fever that currently has the West in its grip.
And for countries like Georgia, I'm sure for countries like Ukraine, it is time to realize that just getting used by America is going to do them no good, because the New World Order cannot be denied anymore. I'm not talking about the morality of the Russian invasion. Don't get me wrong, Maxim. I believe that much of what Russia is doing is morally wrong. The kind of attacks that there have been on civilians, the casualties, is morally wrong. But if you look at a larger perspective, then a pure survey of the world speaks for itself. For example, Assad is visiting the UAE while bin Zayed says that we will bolster Russia. 40 countries did not toe the American line at the UNGA. There is a serious bloc emerging between China and Russia, right? And Venezuela, Nicaragua, Cuba, all deepening ties with Russia. Oil exporting countries, OPEC is with Russia. So America has completely failed to isolate Russia. What does that indicate, Maxim?
Yeah, hello, do you hear me all right?
Yes, very much.
Great. So when we talk about multipolar world, to me, it's always been that way. I mean, ever since the end of the Cold War, when bipolar world collapsed, as Soviet Union collapsed, there's been global powers or global blocs in the world that I wouldn't say dictated something to someone. I mean, when we talk about politics, sitting in our comfy homes and offices, there are people dying, people being bombed. Just 2 days ago, a friend of mine, Russian journalist, was killed in Kiev under the Russian bombing. So many of my family live in Ukraine, and they either fled or in shelters. So I wouldn't say U.S. Failed in isolating Russia. I can see it is isolated. And when we talk about this block between Russia and China, I can see China as a global power. But even though I am Russian and I'm proud to be Russian, as a Russian culture, not as a Russian politics. What can Russia actually offer to China? Yes, Russia has oil and natural gas, but what else? Military? I can't see a great success in military invasion of Ukraine by Russia. So what else? Technology? Russia doesn't have any technology. We don't do even microchips for, I don't know, anything. The biggest automobile factory in Russia is now suspend production because it is heavily dependent on electronics, which Russia doesn't produce. What else doesn't Russia produce? Nothing in technologies is produced. There were big talks about Russian mobile phones, smartphones, about Russian pads as an iPad. It's only talks. In decades, it just talks about how great Russia is. But when it comes to reality, we can't produce any sort of technology. Even our military that President Putin is so proud of, or at least used to be so proud of, with parades on a Victory Day each year, where is it?
That is a fact. I mean, either, let's be clear about it. It may not be because of Russia's strengths. It may equally be, Victor, because nobody is afraid of America anymore. America's heyday is over. America's sphere of influence is being questioned. North Korea is testing ICBMs. Iran has undermined American sanctions. American sanctions have completely and utterly failed against Iran. Am I right? Am I wrong? Mr. Professor Marandi is there in Tehran. He's joining us today.
Yes, I agree completely. And I think we have to keep in mind a point that you mentioned earlier. I, too, am very much against war. When the United States wanted to invade Iraq, I participated in the anti-war rallies in London and in Birmingham, in England, even though I despise Saddam Hussein. But the problem was that the United States did not have the legitimate right to invade Saddam Hussein. So I don't like the war in Ukraine, but we have to keep in mind that the United States has been invading, and NATO countries, country after country, Iraq, Libya, what we're seeing, the genocide in Yemen, the continued occupation of huge parts of Syria. And then, yes, of course, the list goes on. And then on the other hand, when we look at Europe, after the Cold War, there was an opportunity for the whole of Europe to come together. What did the United States do? They lied to the Russians. They said that we won't expand eastwards, and they did. For what purpose? Russia wanted desperately to become a part of Europe. I would say pathetically so. I mean, it was just too much. But still, they tried to undermine Russia. Then as they went eastwards, then the coup in Ukraine, the biolabs, as pointed out, the support for Nazi groups, the same thing that they did in Syria, the same thing that they did in Nicaragua by supporting those Contra-fascists in Nicaragua. They supported ISIS and Al-Qaeda, the same extremist terrorists that now they're supporting in Ukraine. Obviously, all of Ukraine is not Nazi, but neither was Syria. These groups are so vicious that they intimidate the rest of society. So when the United States is constantly invading country after country, when it is trying to provoke countries like Russia or undermine countries like Russia, How in the world do Western countries and NATO countries expect us to have any sympathy for them? And then to get to the final point that you pointed out, when the United States and the Europeans cannot undermine Iran, they failed in their maxim. They targeted